up straight.
Welcome to the August 18th, 2016 meeting of the Murfreesboro City Council. Ms. Madeline Scales Harris has our prayer and our pledge.
Thank you, Mayor. May we bow our heads, please? Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not unto your own understanding. In all things acknowledge him, and he'll direct your path. Lord, you're awesome. Just cannot find any word that you're worthy of. You've blessed me so much. It's been almost a year, Lord, that I've been off this council. And there were days I did not think I would live to see this moment, to take my seat back on this council and to serve your people. Lord, I've come a long way, and I know I have a long way to go. But with your help, I know I'll make it. I'm so blessed to be sitting here in the same position that my mom sat in. And I feel her spirit every time I enter this room. I feel her spirit up in this chair, in this position. And in her last days, and all throughout her life, she always had a smile. No matter how bad her day was, she would smile and say, I'm okay. And Lord, I can say tonight that I'm okay. I've had some low days. Some days I didn't think I was going to make it. Days I did not want to see the night fall, and you know that, Lord. But I made it. And I just want to thank my council buddies. When I say council buddies, I'm including the mayor, too. He's part of our council. And Rob, on my lowest days, my phone would ring. I'd get a text. My doorbell would ring. My council buddies are there with food, even now transportation, anywhere I want to go. And Lord, I just can't thank you enough for them. And Lord, as Ron Washington leads our group, we pray good health for him, and a good retirement as Kurt Wade comes on. We pray for him. And also, right now, we lift Kurt up in the illness of his father as a caregiver, that Kurt can go through that. I can't thank the public enough, Lord. Oh, gosh, the cards, the phone calls, the gift cards. I can't thank you enough as a public. And, Lord, I'd like to offer a special prayer up right now for Doug.
Amen.
In his illness. And just want to let Doug know that I can tell you as being a witness, you have some council buddies, Doug. All you have to do is call us, and we'll be there. And with all the tragedy and the floods and the violence and everything going on around us, we just thank you, Lord, that we can say we are safe in Murfreesboro. We want to thank our police. Thank you for our police force, our firefighters who keep us safe when they leave their families to come and keep us safe. We want to say thank you. Thank you for all our employees, Lord, all the citizens of Murfreesboro, the veterans, the homeless, the disheartened, the grief-stricken. We just want to lift them up, Lord. We lift up our teachers, Lord, as our children have begun to go back to school, that they'll get the knowledge, and our teachers will have the knowledge and the creativity to teach our children. And Lord, as sports starts in Murfreesboro and Rutherford County, we lift up our players to you, Lord, from grammar school on up through college, for their safety. We pray for the coaches that are coaching the athletes, that they not only teach them about the game they are coaching, but they also teach them the game of life. And Lord, as we prepare to handle the business of the city, we ask that you be in our midst and that we are able to discuss issues, give our opinions, respect one another. And once that last vote has been taken, Lord, it's over. We leave the issue right there. And when we depart in love. Lord, I pray for our whole city that we can be a loving city where we love one another, where we can smile at one another. That's priceless, Lord. Doesn't cost anything, just an effort, just a smile to make someone's day, Lord. And Lord, I pray that one day in this world, one day, maybe we won't be so divided and we won't worship things that divide us, or we won't feed into things that divide us as a nation. Things like political parties, things like racial issues. Because, Lord, at the end of the day and at the end of our lives, no matter how many people are surrounding us when we breathe our last breath, it's just going to be between you and us, Lord. And at the end of our life, I want to be able, because I know you're going to say, what did you do to serve me? And I want to be able to say, I served your people, and that's what you want to hear. And I want to hear you say back to me, well done. Lord, this is my prayer. I ask in your darling Son's name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to make sure before we get started, I don't want to miss something, but I want to make sure that Miss Isabella Williams is here, if her and her family are here. Okay, we have a proclamation we're going to present to a 10-year-old fifth grader from Barfield Elementary who won a national dance competition. So I wanted to make sure that we weren't missing, but we'll get her at the next meeting. Okay, we have no ceremonial items tonight. And you have 2 items that are on your consent agenda.
Mayor, seeing no comment on the consent agenda, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Wright.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington. Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. You have one set of minutes, the July 21st, 2016 special meeting. It's the public comments meeting.
Move for approval. Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Wright, you'll call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye. Mayor
McFarland.
Aye. We'll move to new business and consider for approval our certificate of compliance for wine and retail stores from Sean Blum at A Plus, number 234, 1209 Fortress Boulevard.
Mayor, this is a new location for us to have wine in the grocery store, and this is their first step before they go on to the state. Their application is in order, and I recommend approval.
If there are no questions, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion second. Ms. Wright.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll move to item 4. Pursuant to Resolution 16R-PH 29.1, adopted by the City Council on July 21st, 2016, will conduct a public hearing to consider zoning approximately 74 acres located along New Salem Highway as commercial fringe CF district, approximately 26.1 acres, residential multifamily 12 RM12 district, approximately 23.1 acres, and residential zero lot line RZ district, approximately 25 acres, simultaneous with annexation. William and Caroline Waite, applicants, 2016-415. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the August 1st, 2016 issue of a local newspaper. Mr. Blomley.
Good evening, Mayor McFarland and members of council. Our first public hearing tonight is for property located along the south side of New Salem Highway. It's 74 acres in size, as you mentioned. And You may recall this property from June the 23rd. Back on June 23rd, you conducted a public hearing for the annexation of this property and passed the annexation component of this request, but the annexation will not go into effect until the zoning for the property goes into effect. And if you'll recall, there were a couple of items that the applicant or the property owner must address prior to the property being annexed into the city, specifically providing some items for our fire department in order to be able to provide fire protection to the property. The property was recommended unanimously for approval by the Planning Commission for the original request of CF, RM12, and RZ. And we can bring up the map on the property. You'll see it's the large property directly adjacent to the Three Rivers subdivision along the south side of New Salem Highway. Here's a map with the original request, with the front portion as CF, commercial fringe, the middle portion as RM12, multifamily residential with a maximum density of 12 units per acre, and the southern third being RZ, residential zero lot line. Planning Commission, as I mentioned, approved it in its original form. However, I forwarded you an email earlier from Brick Murphy representing the Waits, and I provided a printed out copy for you on your desks. Mr. Murphy, on behalf of the Waits, has modified the request so that the middle portion of the property is being requested for RZ as well. So that means the southern 2/3 of the property is now being requested for RZ, and the RM12 request is no longer on the table. The subject property is located within the boundaries of the future land use map of the Salem Pike Land Use Study. The Salem Pike Land Use Study recommends that the northern portion of the property developed as mixed-use limited plan development, which is defined as all medium and high-density residential, institutional, offices, and general farming as well. The southern portion is recommended, the southern 2/3 approximately of the property is recommended as medium-density residential, which is defined as all single-family and two-family residential uses that involve a density of at least 3 units per acre, but less than 8 units per acre, as well as institutional, convenience-scale commercial uses on a selective and limited basis, and general farming. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions with regards to this rezoning request. As I mentioned, the Planning Commission recommends approval unanimously, and their public hearing was held at its May 4th meeting. Also of note, on the email from Mr. Murphy are 2 additional commitments that were discussed at the Planning Commission meeting. There were concerns about a liquor store being in the CF zone. Mr. Murphy has agreed to place restrictive covenants on the property, and he would have those restrictive covenants for you before second reading, that liquor stores would be prohibited in the CF zone, and also a restrictive covenant to provide a 30-foot buffer. And at the Planning Commission meeting, the preservation of the existing tree row along the eastern property line was discussed as a component of that buffer. So he is making those commitments, and he will be providing a copy of the restrictive covenants prior to second reading. Just as a reminder, restrictive covenants are not items that the city can enforce. Mr. Murphy agreeing to that is just a good faith effort to show an attempt to address the concerns of the adjacent neighbors. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I believe Mr. Murphy would like to say a few words before we open the public hearing as well.
Matthew, members of the City Council, Mayor McFarland, and members of staff. I'm Brick Murphy of the law firm of Murphy & Goodman, and I've been representing the Waits on this project for a number of months now. Initially, when we started this project, we'd identified 3 potential uses: commercial on the road frontage, in the middle, multifamily component, and then in the back, the RZ component, which is essentially a townhome style zoning classification. We also identified the importance to reach out to the neighbors. We had multiple one-on-one meetings with the neighbors, small group meetings, a neighborhood meeting, and I've tried to be in contact with them on a regular basis since then, and this has been an ever-evolving project. Initially, we discussed maybe trying to restrict the multifamily to allow for condos and those sorts of things, but we began to see that the council's concern and the neighbors' concern with the enforceability of restrictions and those sorts of things. And so as an accommodation to the neighbors, we've removed the request for any multifamily on the project at all. So there won't be apartments. The 25 or so acres there in the middle that Mr. Bromley referred to that we previously were requesting for multifamily, that's off the table. We've made a formal request now that that be zoned RZ, which would not allow condominiums or apartments, as a way to try to further address concerns expressed by the neighbors. One of the initial concerns expressed by the neighbors was the desire to have additional setback and distance between any developments on the Waite property and their adjoining county subdivision. The property, as you know, is adjoined by a county subdivision on one side, and then on the other side by the Three Rivers subdivision. The folks in Three Rivers have not expressed to us any concern about any additional needed setbacks or bufferings there, but the county subdivision neighbors, and I believe it's Stewart's Creek, if I'm correct, if I may be wrong on the name, did express concerns. And so even though we've removed our request for apartment complexes or the ability to build an apartment complex, we're standing by our commitment to that 30-foot setback and the effort to preserve the very mature standing tree line there. As Joseph Adelot, our planning director, previous planning director, used to say, distance is the best buffering. And so we'll have not only this 30-foot buffer, which is at least twice as wide as what would be required in many places on the property. We're going to make it 30 feet. I realize that the city does not enforce restrictions, but I've yet to have a client who made a commitment, put a restriction down that we didn't hold the ultimate developer to those restrictions. And so I'm here to tell you that they do work in the right hands, and that 30-foot setback and the effort to preserve those trees is something we're committed to do. The only caveat I'd say to that, and Sam Huddleston with the city has pointed this out to me, to the extent that we need to or have to, we may have to pull utilities through there or drainage structures. The desire is to keep that tree line. But what we don't want to do is have a tree line make property not drain properly and create larger problems than a tree line would. We'll still be held, obviously, to the city standards in terms of landscaping and buffering, but we want to make that additional commitment to the neighbors. They've got beautiful, large lots, and we want to be good neighbors. And the other commitment that we will make is no liquor stores in the commercial fringe. Initially, often I come forward with commercial zonings and request commercial highway. We didn't do that here. We requested commercial fringe, which is a much more sensitive zoning. It doesn't allow kennels. It doesn't allow a lot of the sort of objectionable commercial uses that just aren't in keeping so close to upscale residential. So what we're proposing today is on RZ zoning for 75% of the property, roughly, and then the 25% in the front, it's about 25 acres or so, to be commercial fringe with the prohibition on liquor stores. And I'll prepare those restrictions detailing the setback commitment and the liquor store commitment and have them in recordable format and record them before the second final reading. And I will, of course, send a copy of those to the city legal department. I realize the city does not enforce them and will not, but I want to make sure that the commitments I make and my client makes here, y'all feel like we've met those commitments. So I really appreciate all the time and effort that the neighbors have put into this. My clients have worked very, very hard to try to find common ground on this project. It's a difficult thing to do. It's hard to make everyone happy, but I hope we get somewhere where everybody feels like they've been heard and that we've addressed the major concerns they've had. Mr. Clyde Roundtree with Huddleston Steel is here. Also, Mr. William Waite and Caroline Waite, who've lived on the property for over 30 years and are long-standing citizens of our community, are here. We'd be happy to answer any questions either before or after the public hearing. And I appreciate your support and would ask you to vote in favor of this amended application. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Murphy? Okay, thank you, Mr. Murphy. All right, we'll need to hold a public hearing. Before we open the podium, we ask that anyone wishing to speak for or against would come to the podium. They'll keep all comments to the City Council. If you have any questions, we'll get those answered at the end of the public hearing. You have 3 minutes if you're speaking as an individual, 5 if you're speaking on behalf of a group. And I believe that's everything. So we will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this zoning request, please come to the podium.
Good evening. Mayor, City Council, my name is Wayne Overman. I live at 133 Spence Creek Lane. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Spence Creek Lane residents, and I have a letter of the residents that I'd like to read into the record with your permission. I have copies here for you. Let me begin by saying some of the comments in my letter are going to be a little bit out of sync because the proposal this evening is not the proposal that we were aware of. This is not it's not unusual on this particular project, as I will talk about in my letter. My name is Wayne Overman, and my address is 133 Spence Creek Lane, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I've lived at this address for over 20 years, and like my neighbors, have invested a lot of my time, sweat, and effort into my property. I'm here tonight on behalf of my family and all the families that live on Spence Creek Lane, all of which, by the way, have signed this letter. First, we'd like to say that we understand the Waite's desire and right to request annexation and zoning changes that would maximize the return on their property. And we support that right, and we take no issue with it. At the same time, we hope they are not offended by our efforts to minimize any negative impacts on our property and value and investments. We believe that if done correctly, this dynamic tension is actually healthy to the overall process. We get better decisions that way. Not that many years ago, the Spence Creek residents participated in the development of the Salem Pike Land Use Plan conducted by the city. The plan, as stated earlier, called for medium density housing defined as 3 to 8 homes per acre. Based on the confidence we have in the city, we felt we had a reasonable expectation that the area would develop in general conformance to that plan, and we continue to invest heavily in our properties. But we also recognize things change, and divergence from a long-range plan is sometimes warranted. We're just not sure this is one of those circumstances. The Waites have requested you annex and rezone 26 acres nearest Highway 99 to be commercial fringe. We take no issue with that request, provided the restrictions of the Planning and Zoning Commission are adhered to. The remaining 48 acres is away from any main thoroughfare and surrounded by residential single-family properties being requested to be RM and RZ. We've met periodically with the Waites engineering and legal team since April. We raised concerns with the proposed zoning and ultimately settled on a 30-foot buffer and eliminated the development of apartment-like structures. With over 260 acres and 4,225 additional apartment units already under construction or approved in this corridor, we believe there's more than adequate capacity and no need for more apartment-like structures. As you know, the public hearing was scheduled 23rd of this year, but deferred at the last minute. Minutes, and I mean literally minutes, maybe seconds prior to the public hearing, Mr. Murphy acknowledged some of our concerns and proposed a compromise, but due to the 11th hour nature of that proposal, decided to request the council delay the public hearing. That evening, we met with Mr. Murphy outside the hall, and he explained he would get us language for review to address our concerns. The following day, I contacted Mr. Murphy to set a meeting to continue the conversation. A few days later, he followed up to tell me he would like to delay it till after the 4th of July. Late in July, having not heard anything, I again reached out to him for status. Mr. Murphy informed me that they had set the new public hearing date for August 18th, and he would create a bullet list for us to review, as he had explained after the public hearing. Having experienced 11th hour dash prior to the last public hearing, I request we be given adequate time to review it. On July 28th, he again committed to send a proposed bullet list stating that the meat and potatoes are in commitments. Finally, in the afternoon of August 11th, now only 7 days, actually 6 days prior to this hearing, and only one weekend, which is weekends are important to us because most of us have full-time jobs, we did get an email that restricted apartments but did not outlaw townhomes and residential condominiums. He provided language about multifamily homes. I'm not a real estate attorney, but the language, as I am told from legal advice, did not deal with our concerns. While two 11th-hour proposals does not set a trend, it does seem to be a pattern to rush things through before we have a chance to review them. Unfortunately, that has sort of happened again this evening. At this juncture, then, at any rate, we want you to know that we support the request for annexation for the 26 acres near Highway 99 to CF, provided the CF uses are agreed to as from the Planning Commission. For the remaining 46 acres, we support the annexation. But since the proposed restrictive covenants, as originally, more recently proposed, didn't address our concerns, we did not support the RM and RZ zoning. We would, however, suggest the 46 acres be zoned to RS15 because we fully know that during the build-out of this property, there will be many developer and builders, and that the future developer and builders will be asking for more dense zoning. Our proposal would allow Mr. Waite to continue to market the property, but when a purchaser is ultimately identified, they would be required to provide a planned unit development along with their request for higher density zoning. And that would allow the neighbors to have an input on the type and quality of the development. So with this, I believe our request is reasonable, that we are keeping with the general intent of the land use plan, the practices of the city, and fair to both the applicant and the surrounding residents. I would like just to add a footnote to my letter, if I may have just another minute. All right. Thank you, Mayor. It's my understanding that last week at the City Council meeting that you passed a hold on all new multifamily housing, and until additional studies can be completed, which shares our concern that we are being overrun with multifamily housing. I recognize this is not a new application, but the concern is the same that we've been voicing since April. As I earlier stated, I'm not an attorney, and there's a lot of things about city zoning that I don't know. I do know that at the close of this meeting, Mr. Murphy will have the opportunity to rebut my statements. And if he does his job well, which I'm sure he will, he'll attempt to convince you that they've done everything in their power to meet our concerns. And with that, I would refer you to page 3 of my letter, where I have made multiple attempts to meet and resolve this issue in advance of this meeting. But once again, we are faced with new changes of which I am not in a position to speak for my neighbors to react to. I think you'll find we're not opposed to development, and rather we're in favor of quality controlled development And I think we've offered a sensible solution to this impasse, which takes into consideration the neighborhood and the Waits and their right to maximize their property. And from what I know of the City Council, an approach this council prides itself on, getting together, getting to a solution outside of this council chambers. Therefore, I'd ask your request to proceed with the annexation, but to zone the 26 acres near Highway 99 as CF and the remaining as RS15 to give the neighborhood some control over the type and quality of development in our neighborhood. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rover. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against?
Okay, here comes the deal killer. The deal killer. He'll have us fist fighting in 5 minutes. Call him Mr. Trump.
Council, I'm Larry Sims, and I live at 537 East Main Street. Back in '69, I moved to Murfreesboro and rented an apartment over at Le Beau Chateau Apartments. Caroline and Bill Waite was the owners with the other family members. I lived there, I worked there. Unfortunately, Mark Pirtle was in the same unit I was in. Brian Reel, Dr. Reel was in that. And I'd go on the back, and they had a fence about that high, and I took my English Bulldog back there, and Mayor Westbrook was on the back. And we'd come over and we'd talk to each other. And that's where I got to know Mr. Westbrook. Of course, his wife threatened to kill me if my Bulldog got her cat. She put the cat on a little fence there. Anyway, the Waits have been tremendous in development. I could get up here and name quite a few. They've been high quality. They've been over backwards. Bill has been on the CUD board for 28 years. CUD board's probably done as much as anybody in this county and city to do something. Bill has sacrificed a lot. They came to me and asked me, and I've been doing this 38 years, so I didn't fall off the turnip wagon the other day. And I never will forget, I was down here several years ago when Bill and Nancy Sellers proposed zoning their property to multifamily. And I said, well, that's going to be an interesting outcome. And sure enough, it was an interesting outcome. So the reason I'm getting is Waits have been I think they've been thrown a curve. We had no idea that this was going to be done. We know Mr. Haley has been a lot of pressure. Even though he's been gone 8 years, it looks like he's still got a lot of influence. And we know that, and Spence Creek, if they're that excited about what we're trying to do, why don't they go ahead and be annexed in the city? There's nothing wrong with that. Just annex them to the city, and that way they can get the sewer, they get the trash, they get the benefits. So I think that would be a good move for them. The other thing about it, we did not request unreasonable zoning. If your 2035 plan calls for over half of that property to be zoned commercial. Now, we're not asking for half of it. And if the plan calls for that, I think the Waits ought to come back and ask for half of it to be zoned commercial. That'd be 50 acres. That's in keeping with the plan that y'all are proposing, and see what we can do with the balance of it. Up until now, we had 3 parties interested in buying this property. Today, we have nobody. Nobody. It's because of what's happening and the response they've gotten down from the planning department and trying to get the zoning done. So we're not getting any cooperation there. And I think they've been treated misfairly in this zoning. They deserve better than this. They've done better than this. So with this, it's up to them. It's their property. But if I was them, I'd still pull it again, because we've heard some stuff tonight we had no idea. No idea that it was going to ask for RS-15. And the Waits can't get what they want. They deserve to get as much money for their property. They haven't done anything wrong. And all of a sudden, we're getting something that you're not even requiring anybody else to do. You don't require anybody to do RS-15. If these developers come in today, I've been going on for several years. They sat down, they said, downzone it. I can show you. Don't do RS-15. Get it down to 5,000 square foot lots. The lots in the city right now are getting to be 50 feet wide, 45 to 120. That's 5,000 square feet. And all of a sudden, y'all want to make a 15,000 square foot lot? Cost of development, you know why they're 5,000 square feet? Because you can't develop it and sell it. You got to have too much money. So they're letting the developers move the lots down to 5 so they can go ahead and develop and sell the lots. And then not only that, the people don't even want big lots anymore. They're wanting small lots. You just bought 125 acres of recreational land. You're fixing to buy 350 more, which is nothing wrong with that. That's a great deal. People want to go to those parks. They don't want out there in the front yard. They want a small lot. So I don't know. We just need to rethink this. And not only that, we had Mr. Huddleston to look at the possibility of zoning apartments. He does a study, and he comes out and finds out we're only 2.7 years, 2 years and 7 months demand for apartments, the zoning we've got today. Bill Huddleston says that's not enough. I think you're having 100 apartments rented a month. So something's wrong there. Somebody's got something wrong.
Mr. Sims,
And you know that people's going to be coming in this town. I guess I got to hush then.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I was thinking I was speaking for a group, but maybe I'm not.
Well, you're at 4 minutes and 48 seconds, so I'm almost letting you speak for a group.
Well,
so.
anyway, and I appreciate it. And trust me, I wouldn't want your job, and I wouldn't have your job. But it's something's not right here. And y'all might not sense it, but I do. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And we'll now consider for passage on first reading ordinance 16OZ29, a zoning area along New Salem Highway as commercial fringe CF district, residential multifamily 12, RM12 district, and residential lot lines RZ district simultaneous with annexation. And Mr. Tindall, will we need, if we're going to consider this as an amended to the entire other portion, I guess the other 23.1 acres is RZ, how do we need to do that?
Well, you would remember, there'd be a motion, after discussion, there'd be a motion for an amendment to the resolution, and then vote on the amendment, and then we'll vote on the resolution as amended.
Okay.
Yep. I said resolution. It's an ordinance.
We haven't voted on the ordinance yet, so we would just change the ordinance.
It would be the
and vote on
ordinance.
it.
I said resolution.
Okay. All right, council members.
It seems to me that there's been surprises on both sides. This is the first I've heard of the RS-15. But then again, Mr. Waite has come in with a request to take out the RM-16, which was what the neighbors objected to the most. It seems like to me that it's a pretty simple solution. The neighbors are not going to get apartments. And that's, to me, if I read them correctly, and I'm on the Planning Commission and had numerous discussions with both sides, Mr. Oldman also, that was their primary concern. They had some concerns about the setback, and there was a compromise there. They had some concerns about the commercial fringe, from commercial highway to commercial fringe, and that was a good compromise there. Now, the applicant, Mr. Wade, has come back in with a request to take out the RM-12 and rezone it to RZ, which my understanding is primarily a townhome zone. Ms. Green, Mr. Bromley, is that a correct? Give me a little information on the RZ, please, sir.
Yes, sir. RZ, residential zero lot line, is primarily a single-family zoning designation. It would allow zero lot line attached homes. And the example of that would be the many subdivisions that Decker and Belt have developed, Salem Cove Crossing, Indian Hills Crossing, I forget the exact name of it, right there across from the City Schools Administration. They've developed several of those around town. That's an example of a zero lot line attached product. Also, the RZU zone would permit single-family detached lots on smaller lots than you would see in RS8, RS10, RS12. The minimum lot size in the RZ zone for single-family detached is 3,000 square feet. I think more often than not, we see the RZ detached lots closer to 4,500, 5,000, 5,500 square feet. I think rarely would we see a single-family detached lot in the RZ zone all the way down at the bare minimum of 3,000 square feet. The only time that it would allow a condo product or a product where there's common area and just the individual structures are owned is if those are no more than 2 units attached to each other. And I can only think of one example of that is the cottages at Innsbrook over there behind the Kroger on South Church Street. I believe it's an age-targeted product with 2 condo-style patio homes attached to each other. But more often than not, in the RZ zone, we see the single-family attached, where individuals have their own lot, front yard, backyard, and it's attached to one other unit, or we see the single-family detached on smaller lots.
Would that be considered a medium density? I mean, he actually brought up kind of a 3 to 8, that 3 to 8 units per acre.
The southern 2/3 or so of the property is recommended by the Salem Pike Land Use Plan as medium density residential, which is all single family and 2-family residential uses that involve a density of between or at least 3 but less than 8 units an acre.
So RZ is going to be right in that.
RZ is generally consistent with that recommendation. There may be an instance where it may exceed that density a little bit, but in general, the lot sizes that we see for RZ single-family development would generally be consistent with that recommendation.
Well, I'm going to step out there and just say, this has been going on for a long time, and I will tell you that we see a whole lot of these, and I'm appreciative of the fact that the owners, the Waits, and their representatives have, it looks to me like, come up with an awfully fair proposal that fits in with our land use plan, and it's hard for me to understand how I couldn't support that. So, thank you guys. Thanks, Matthew.
If no other discussion, I move for approval.
Second.
Okay, so is this approved as amended?
As amended.
Removing the RM12.
Okay.
Removing the RM, right? Yeah.
Let me ask one question before we move forward on that for the vote. What is the review process on the RZ? Matthew, could you speak to that?
With the RZ development, it would be more of a subdivision platting process as opposed to a site plan process that we would see for a townhome development or an apartment development where they would submit a site plan. Here, a subdivision plat would have to be submitted meeting our minimum development requirements and our subdivision regulations, and with public streets. And that's another main difference between the traditional RZ development and a townhome or an apartment development, is there will be public streets built to city standards. One thing that I would like to mention, the buffer that they're committing to, because RZ is a single-family zone, there is no buffering requirement between the RZ zone and single-family zones. So the 30-foot buffer that they are proposing would be on top of no buffering requirement that would be standard by the city zoning.
Yeah, but it's not enforceable by the city.
That's correct. It would be privately enforced, not by the city.
But the plat process does not involve the citizens or the neighbors or anything.
It would not be a public hearing process, but it would go to the Planning Commission for subdivision plat review, and that would be a public meeting, open to the public. And certainly what we tell everybody is that The planning and engineering staffs are happy to sit down with folks, go over the plans in detail, explain how they'll drain, explain where the roads will be located, the lot sizes that are proposed, and we're more than happy to do that with anybody who'd like.
So the neighbors could request some input into that process, a reaction to the process?
Certainly. The Planning Commission, with most every request, puts conditions on, or with most every site plan and subdivision plat, has the authority to put reasonable conditions on their approval. And the Planning Commission oftentimes hears from neighbors and with certain concerns, and Mr. Smotherman and Mr. Young can attest to this, that they do take those concerns seriously, and our Planning Commission does scrutinize the plans very, very hard.
Okay, you have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Ms. Wright, you'll call the roll.
Ms. Gales Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
No.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll move to item 5. Pursuant to Resolution 16R PH 33 adopted by the City Council on July 21st, 2016, conduct a public hearing to consider amending approximately 150.5 acres in the Planned Industrial Development PID District Parkway Place, located along Joe B. Jackson Parkway. Joe Swanson, applicant, 2016-422. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the August 1st, 2016 issue of a local newspaper. Ms. Green.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The next item before you is for you to consider a request to amend an existing PID zoning for property that's Planned Industrial District. This property is shaded in orange on the map before you, and you can see it's currently zoned PID. The property is bordered by single-family subdivisions to the east, Amazon to the west, and Interstate 24 to the west. The subject area consists of 3 separate parcels, which are all under the same PID and ownership. In 2008, there was a request to zone this property just to bulk zone of industrial, light industrial district, and the City Council and Planning Commission were uncomfortable with that request, particularly considering it being located directly adjacent to existing county subdivisions. So the applicants came back for a PID application, and at that time, the development did not move forward. There have been a couple amendments since the initial approval in 2008 to change the location of the road, maybe the buffering and the uses. Now the current owner, Joe Swanson Jr., has acquired the property and has a more specific plan for portions of the property. And because he knows the type of development he'd like to do and is comfortable with that, he needed to amend the program book to reflect the type of development. The program book has been distributed to you in your packets and I think couriered to you as well, and it gives some specifics for the property. It is still located in 4 different regions. Region 1 is the most commercial-like region, located along Joe B. Jackson Parkway with that frontage on Joe B. Jackson Parkway. And then the regions that are directly adjacent to the single-family subdivisions don't allow quite as intense of uses. The public hearing for this matter was July 13th, and it was well attended, and there were neighbors with quite a bit of concern regarding the proposed development. With the initial submittal of the program book, Mr. Swanson was proposing an 8-foot masonry wall, which is highly unusual. We don't typically see that, but that wall was being proposed for the narrow portion of this property to help not only as a visual buffer, but to help as a sound buffer. After that evening, the Planning Commission heard that quite a few people had concerns with the wall and would be much more satisfied if they would just increase the height of the wall to 9 feet. So you can see the book that you have has the masonry wall as 9 feet tall, when originally it was reviewed as 8 feet tall. The Planning Commission did consider the matter, and after the applicants increased the height of that wall, they recommended approval unanimously of the application. Mr. Rob Mulchin is representing the applicant. He's prepared a short presentation. He'd like to go over that with you. I'd be happy to answer questions that you may have regarding this application, either before or after the public hearing.
Mr. Mulchin.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Rob Olchin, SEC. I'm here today with behalf of Joe Swanson, who's in attendance as well, in regards to the amendment to Parkway Place, the PID that was originally approved, like Marguerite Ann said, back in 2008, with a few amendments. A little synopsis of the project itself. Again, 150 acres. It was originally broken into 4 regions. Those regions were, delegated in regards to the different types of uses that was outlined in the program book as well. Again, the updated plan is more or less in 4 roughly the same location regions, just a little bit of amendment based on what Mr. Swanson's planning on doing with the first 2 pieces, which would be Region 1 and Region 2. Region 1 is along Joe B. Jackson and is also along Richard Reeves Drive, which has been the first leg of that was installed with the Amazon development. This will be a mixture of mostly commercial, office, retail, and restaurant type of stuff, so more of your localized uses in regards to the population that is out there in regards to the warehouse workers, but also the community at large that is growing around the area as well. Region 2, this is more or less the next piece as you move into the property. This is the property that divides Amazon from the subdivisions to the east. This will be more or less a flex warehouse, or what has been deemed an incubator industry. This is more or less the incubator industry is the idea of a small warehouse component to each of these buildings that allows small businesses to grow. They can grow this big, add more space while they're there, or move on to another location in regards to that, to their business. Regions 3 and 4 more or less have remained unchanged with regards to the 2008 to the plan today. Again, this will be mainly larger industrial or warehouse type uses with some commercial retail components of possibility in the future. At this time, Mr. Swanson doesn't have any plans for this area, but we just have, as part of the amendment, we need to address this area as well. A little bit of some history. We've got water and sewer availability already to the site, and most of the drainage all flows away from the residential subdivisions towards I-24. As you can see, the existing land use plan mostly to the west is high industrial, light industrial, and then to the east is residential. It would be county properties on the east, with some commercial highway and components at the intersection of Joe B. Jackson and Manchester Pike. You can see the site itself is mostly wooded or with a scrub brush material for the environment. Oops. Here's a few images of some of the existing vegetation. This is there was a buffer installed in Region 1 years back. It's more or less a Class B buffer or Type B buffer. This is a roughly double staggered row of evergreen pines or evergreen trees that is providing a visual screen between Joe B. Jackson and the subdivision itself. This is the narrowest portion of the property between the residential component and Joe B. Jackson. Some other views of the existing vegetation from the subdivisions surrounding the property. Again, this is, like I said, this is the narrowest portion of the property in relationship to the subdivision and Joe B. Jackson. There was, like I said, the initial installation of a buffer, and it has grown in well. This is the existing tree line that Marguerite Ann alluded to in regards to the change at the Planning Commission, where we originally proposed an 8-foot tall masonry wall. The proposal here is to incorporate the existing tree row, leave it as is, but enhance it with a Type E 25-foot wide buffer. And we'll also be installing a 9-foot tall masonry wall as part of that buffer. That buffer will be included with a double staggered row of evergreen trees as a backdrop between the residence and the wall. The rest of the property, especially in regions 3 and 4, will be, the existing foliage is being protected by a minimum 50-foot wide landscape easement, more or less, to preserve the trees. It bumps out in a few places where the vegetation is a little thinner, so we can enhance that with a little deeper setback. Access to the site, Richard Reeves Drive comes in off Amazon. They originally proposed the extension of Richard Reeves Drive was to the western side, the Amazon side of the property. We're now proposing to put that roadway through the middle, based on the program that I'll be discussing here in regards to Region 2 in a moment. Based on the plan that Mr. Swanson has come up for the incubator industries. This will be a continuation of the 3-lane, 60-foot wide commercial collector street, 3 lanes. The next portion of infrastructure with this first portion of the development will be a 2-lane, 40-foot wide cross-section that will be more or less a connector street between Joby Jackson and the extension of Richard Reeves Drive. This will allow for access to a couple of the sites in Region 1 that I'll discuss in a moment. Here's a blow-up of the Region 1 area in regards to Joby Jackson. These, like I said, will be mostly lots for sale for commercial office or restaurant-type uses. You can see the extension of the Richard Reeves coming off the Amazon property, but also, again, our 40-foot little connector road that will allow for access to a couple of these sites as they're currently proposed. Again, the buffer that's part of this section. Region 2, this is the portion that Mr. Swanson's wants to really explain to everybody in regards to what his plans are with this from the incubator industry standpoint. This is the sliver, as I spoke to, that separates Amazon from the residential portions in the county next door. This will be mostly flex incubator type, warehouse type uses, but again, commercial uses, restaurant uses, and all those things are outlined in the book as the potentials that for those clientele that would come in to utilize the buildings that we're proposing. Here's a plan, or at least a conceptual plan, what we're anticipating to look at as we extend the Richard Reeves Drive through the heart of this neck of the property. On either side, we're looking at incubator warehouse buildings, which would be roughly about 75-foot wide. The design of these is not fully, compared. We're not really set up yet in regards to this, but this is the concept of how these are going to look. Again, the opportunities to break these buildings into smaller buildings where an actual business can actually, lease the one building by themselves, or they can lease pieces of each of the larger buildings themselves. Again, the roadway between the two gives us the opportunity to have, a corridor for the south portion, which would be the Region 3 and 4 in the future. There's a little bit of enlargement. Looking at the landscape treatment, we'll be, of course, utilizing the current zoning regulations in regards to landscaping, separating the roadways from the parking lots, but also at the foundations and around detention facilities. One of the key ingredients to this portion of this incubator thing in regards to relationship to the neighbors next door is the fact that we're proposing not to have any docking areas along the back sides of these warehouses. What we've incorporated is a concept for a single docking area between these buildings where a larger tractor-trailer truck that makes deliveries to these buildings would come in more or less, rotate through the space itself, and then coming back into the space where they would unload here. So more or less you'd have forklifts or tow motors and such moving into those trucks. You wouldn't have larger vehicles moving between the buffer and the residence to the east and the backs of these buildings. Just a little relationship in regards to the existing homes and the proposed development. A little cross-section kind of gives you an idea in regards to scope. The majority of the homes that are out there, you're looking at over 250 feet of separation between the existing home and the proposed backs of these buildings. There is one or two situations where it's actually a little bit closer because there was an extension of a street that we will not be extending into the property with this development. It will stay as a dead-end street in regards to our project. Here's some conceptual renderings of what these buildings are consistently going to look like. We're looking for a change of facades, a little, change of materials, a little bit of an industrial feel. That way, it's not one monocultural element of elevation along that building facade. Getting on to Regions 3 and 4, like I said, we're really not doing anything with these Regions 3 and 4. Mr. Swanson just wanted to kind of update the program book in regards to these properties. Again, these will mostly be in Regions 3 and 4, a maximum of 75-foot high buildings in there, mainly industrial warehouse type uses on these properties with some potentials for commercial, retail, or office spaces back there. And again, Region 4, which is along the residential, we propose to bring the building heights back down to more of a 45-foot maximum building height for those industrial type uses that are in there. We've also outlined a few other items inside the booklet itself in regards to tractor trailers and such. Again, proximity to the property lines in relationship to the development itself. Again, architectural will go through the PC approval process when we get to that point, looking at neutral colors, roofline variations, qualities, materials, and such that the Planning Commission will be reviewing for approval at that time. These are some of the existing warehouse buildings and/or the business the office type spaces that are across the street in the developments. These are kind of in line with some of the things that we're looking at using from styles and character and materials in regards to our development. at Parkway Place. Stone, brick, masonry is going to be one of the major components to this. Tilt-up concrete walls and pavers and other such. With that, I'll be open to any questions you guys may have, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Mollica. Any questions? Thank you. Okay. We'll need to conduct a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against amending this planned industrial development, the public hearing is now open.
Hello, my name is Dana Bryson. I live at 117 Prairie View Drive. I am along the corridor where Region 2 will be up against my property. First, I'd like to address that we appreciate the accommodations for the 9-foot wall. We really feel, well, I do and my husband, and I feel that the neighbors also feel that that was a good accommodation, that they extended the height of the wall. Just a few things that my husband and I have discussed for Region 1. It wasn't discussed a lot at the Planning Commission, the meeting we had. We were concerned with the possibility of 24-hour restaurants that close to a residential area. One of the houses on that corner also had stipulations with Mr. Swanson to, whenever someone bought that property next to their house, it doesn't have the 9-foot wall, and that they would require that business to do that. But if it was like a 24-hour McDonald's or something like that, we're off the exit for an interstate, so that's very possible. We still had concerns that wasn't really fitting into being directly next to a house. I know it happens other places in the city, so I'm not saying we're any more special. But we do have concerns about that. Also, the lighting and signage for buildings right on Joe B. Jackson, if they're going to be higher signs. I know that the city has ordinances to restrict those, but those are concerns. For our Region 2, we appreciated the lighting, meeting the standards, and we would request that the canopy, it is deciduous and it's not as wide as the renderings show for the canopy, that we would hope that they would maintain as much as they can when they are moving in, putting the wall. Because I know if you're going to make a 9-foot wall, there's a lot of leveling and all that goes with it. So those trees are mostly hackberries and walnuts, and some of them are very tall but not very wide. And I know that the trees that they're going to stack for the pines will take several years to establish themselves. Also, I might have misheard the gentleman say that restaurants were also zoned for Region 2. I don't think I'd heard that before, so I'm hoping that wouldn't be the case. I don't think they would be that far back anyways, so probably not. But just in case, I'd like to bring that up. Also, they did, when we had the meeting, review 10-by-10 doors that would still be in the back of the buildings, which would have access to FedEx trucks, UPS, and, of course, tow motors going from the big semis in their area that they've planned so that semis can't be behind the houses of the residents. I know a lot of my neighbors were concerned about noise and sound and extra heat that could come up from the concrete and asphalt from the parking areas. Since no one else is here, I wanted to just bring those up for my neighbors who I know were much more concerned than I was at the last meetings. As for Region 3 and 4, I don't have any issues with them at the moment since they're not really on development.
What development do you live in?
I'm in the Magnolia Trace. I'm right next to, my house is right up against the, I could look into the buildings. On Prairie View. I'm on 117.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that means that I will be able to see them from my deck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary Farland, Council, Staff, Joe Swanson Jr., 1188 Park Avenue. I've reviewed all the video from '08, and we did have a neighborhood meeting. It went very well. In the review of those videotapes and audio tapes, I came together with SEC to create this plan. One of the things that I want to bring out in this is when the previous owner had it, there was the potential that Amazon would require additional parking. So the roadway that was Richard Reeves Drive got pushed all the way to the east. And there was a berm that was added. What I would like to do, as the plan shows, is to bring that street back to the center of the subdivision, add what was an 8-foot wall to a 9-foot wall, and the ordinance really requires a 6-foot wooden fence at that location. I would bring it along Joe B. Jackson as well, or it would be a part of that developer, whoever built that building, that they would have to put that wall up to separate the neighbors that run along Joe B. Jackson. I've got 200,000 to 300,000 square feet of this type of building. It is really a service incubator type facility. A lot of what I had and some of the changes in the permitted uses were to allow things like karate studios and dance studios and baseball bat practice and things like that that were not in the previous permitted uses chart. Since I've got buildings that are like this, I needed to have those items included so that I could continue to facilitate those incubator industries. Many times we may start with somebody who wants a baseball and they have room, they can only afford one cage, and I'm using this as an example. Well, they'll grow, and now they need to move into more space where they can have 2 or 3 or even 4 cages and have private coaching sessions, just as an example. Concerning the dock use, I've worked really closely with SEC. We will do more work on this, but we feel like we've got a really good handle on the dock situation. These type of facilities don't receive tractor-trailer deliveries every day. These are the types of tenants that may have something once a week, so the need for every tenant to have a dock is not required. So they share a dock. And yes, they'll either hand jack or forklift their items to their drive-in doors on the back of the facility so that they can move their product in and out. The plan here is that with the industry that's out there, these incubator spaces will allow somebody like a forklift repairman, janitorial services, other types of industry service type companies be able to come and facilitate the industry that's moving in. Remove the berm of the wall. I talked about that. In my opinion, and everybody's got an opinion, but with us lowering the original permitted height from 35 to 25 gives us really about a 22-foot eave. That's the low end, which would be the end that is adjacent to the neighbors. But that's going to help block some of that tractor-trailer noise as they come down the road. As it was previously, that road was right up against a berm with trees in it. Now we're adding a fence, a building, and trees. So I think the sound issue will be noticeably diminished from the occupants, from the homeowners. The drive-in doors, yes, that was a concern, but I've got to have facilities to where the customers that I have can facilitate their customers. Concrete has a tremendous solar reflex index, so although there will be heat, it's not as bad as asphalt paving, which is black, which of course absorbs the heat and tends to hang around. On the backs of the buildings, there's an LED light that I use. It's about 150 to 175 watt. I typically put those right outside the door, so there's not a lot of glare. Plus, with the now 9-foot wall, a lot of that will be blocked because the door height will be 7 feet, and it'll be a couple of feet below the top of that door. I'm available for any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak for or against? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And we'll consider for passage on first reading ordinance 1607 OZ33 to amend the conditions applicable to an area in the planned industrial development PID district Parkway Place located along Joe B. Jackson Parkway. Joe Swanson, applicant 2016-422. I just want to start out by saying I think I remember even back when I was on the planning commission that this whole area has been studied for 14 years plus. And I remember when the late Johnny Jones brought I can't say if it was this exact property, but I think it was, that there was a warehouse. And so I remember when we went through the public hearings on this and reading over the Swanson proposal, it's evident that they've tried to work with the homeowners, and also, the Region 2 that Mr. Swanson's talking about. I equate that to on Thompson Lane. You've got across from what used to be Stampede's. There's a warehouse office space, and so it's that's in a predominantly residential area, and it's blended in marvelously. That's where the firefighters have their meeting space, and so you see a lot of smaller offices and different small businesses. So my concern on Region 2, I don't think you're going to have much of a concern, because the uses that'll be there will be your smaller businesses who need a little warehouse space, but they also need office space. So I appreciate what they've done. It looks like a good plan to me.
I was just going to say, I noticed on Region 2, the lady, the resident next door, had asked about restaurants. It looks like the only type of restaurant that is allowed in Region 2, it says restaurant specialty limited. So that does not include a drive-in or a carry-out restaurant. Those are it says restaurant, carry-out not included, drive-in not included, specialty not included, but specialty limited is included. So it's not going to be one that sounds like it's going to have a McDonald's in Region 2.
In that location.
Mayor, let me address the neighborhood out there. That's a great neighborhood. You all look out for each other. And I wish more neighborhoods in the city and the county would do that, because you've come and you've lobbied and you've gotten a whole lot of things that you wanted out of this deal. And that's the way the system works. On the other side of it, Mr. Swanson and his engineering team have worked hard to get what he needs to make this successful, and then to temper that with what the neighborhood wants. So I think it's a pretty good deal for both sides, and I just I want to thank your neighbors for being good neighbors, because you all look out for each other, and we all need to do more of that. And if Eddie, you want to say something?
Well, I'll second what you said. I agree with you 100% on your comments, and the neighborhood at the last public hearing, we listened to several neighbors and who had concerns, and it seemed like all of them have been responded to it to some level, and certainly I think Mr. Swanson actually went beyond what would be expected. I commend Mr. Swanson on the 9-foot wall. I think that's way beyond what we would ask anybody else, but I think that's what it took, and I think that was the compromise that really pushed this deal through for me. So I will go ahead and make the motion that it be approved as presented.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, pursuant to Resolution 16R PH 34, adopted by the City Council on July 21st, 2016, will conduct a public hearing to consider rezoning approximately 13.5 acres located along Brinkley Road from Commercial Fringe District to Planned Residential Development, PRD District, Wilkinson Downs. Robert E. Francis and Jeffrey Gill, applicants, 2016-425. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the August 1st, 2016 issue of a local newspaper. Ms. Green.
Is for you to consider a zoning application for property located along Brinkley Road, and it's the property that's shaded in the orange color on the map that you've been provided. You can see that it's directly adjacent to existing city single-family subdivision that's developed, and then on the opposite side, on the western side, is Brinkley Road. This property is currently zoned CF, that's Commercial Fringe District. Commercial Fringe District allows a variety of commercial uses, but allows less uses than you would see at Commercial Highway, which is normally located on a major arterial. The applicants are requesting to change the zone from a commercial zone to a residential zone, and they're requesting to change it to a PRD, Planned Residential District, which they've titled Wilkerson Downs, and you should have the program book provided to you with the specifications of the Wilkerson Down PRD. Just across from this project is across Brinkley Road. It's property that's zoned RS15, but will not in the future will not be zoned RS15, and a self-storage facility. The proposed plan is for 110 multifamily dwelling units on 13.5 acres for a density of 8 dwelling units an acre. These units are multifamily type use, but they are a townhouse style condominium. Townhouse refers to architectural style, and condominium refers to the form of ownership in which the units are individually owned, and then the area around the units are a common area and are a part of the HOA to maintain. These units are very similar to the townhomes currently located within Puckett Creek Crossing development. The developer of this property, Old South, has a townhome in Puckett Creek Crossing, which will look very much like this, except staff was concerned with this project being so visible along Brinkley Road and possibly Manson Pike. We encouraged them to upgrade the building materials from vinyl siding, and they happily did so, and so these homes will not be vinyl like those in Puckett Creek Crossing. They will be consist of a cement board siding instead of that vinyl. We were also, staff and Planning Commission were concerned with the fact that the back of the units back up to Brinkley Road, and the clients have been able to address our concern with adding a buffer and berm along Brinkley Road so you won't see the rear of those units. The units do provide the connectivity that we asked for. It's not a direct connection, so it discourages traffic to drive through the subdivision because there are several stops, and so they have been able to address our connectivity concern. Mr. Clyde Roundtree is representing the applicant, and I'll invite him to the lectern to provide some additional information. If you have questions about this application, I'm most happy to answer them, and the Planning Commission's recommendation is that you approve it.
Thank you, Mrs. Green. My name is Clyde Roundtree, Mayor McFarland, and members of the council. And my name is Clyde Roundtree with Huddleston Steel Engineering. And as Margaret mentioned, there's been a lot of exchanges with the city staff to try to make sure that this project is one that really accommodates the needs that our client has, Mr. Dan Bobo with Old South Development, and also just making sure the neighbors were heard and their requests through our neighborhood meetings. As Margaret mentioned, it's 110 homes that'll be a part of this development, and they will be an attached home product, but they will be individually owned. And just some of the highlights are about 1,500 to 1,800 square feet as far as the home sizes. They'll range in price starting at $179,000. They'll all be masonry products that's really architecturally sensitive to the surrounding neighborhood, and also was a major request from the city staff. And as Margaret mentioned, it's a down zone from a CF to a PRD, so we're excited about that. And it seems like the neighbors were very accommodating to that as well. As far as the highlights, really most of it had to do with buffers, making sure the buffers were adequate with the adjacent neighborhood, and as Margaret mentioned, making sure that we had a really nice presentation from Brinkley Road. And so in the pattern book, you have a cross-section of what that berm is going to look like. It will be a mixture of evergreen trees, deciduous trees, as well as a fence in between. And the neighbors had concerns that that was a dangerous spot, you know, because the lot currently sits low, so people have gone off of Brinkley Road and kind of gone down into that kind of a ditch area. The site's going to be built up based on the grading plan that we have currently, and that'll prohibit any sort of a kind of a dangerous scenario of people popping that curb and going into that area as kind of like a little valley. The other portion that was important, the neighbors said there's some blind spots on Brinkley Road they're concerned about, and we feel like those will be alleviated with this development. In essence, I'll be available for any questions after the public hearing, but we do appreciate your opportunity to approve this request. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Roundtree? Okay. Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing and consider this rezoning request. Anyone wishing to speak for or against? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll consider for passage on first reading ordinance 1607 to rezone an area located along Brinkley Road to planned residential development, PRD District 2016-425.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Abstain.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Pursuant to Resolution 16R-PH35, adopted by the City Council on July 21st, 2016, will conduct a public hearing and consider rezoning approximately 2 acres located along North Rutherford Boulevard and Old Lascassas Road from Commercial Fringe CF District to Highway Commercial CH District. Eric Lohman, applicant, 2016-427. Notice of said public hearing was published on the August 1st, 2016 issue of a local newspaper. Ms. Green.
That's before you is to consider an application to rezone a little less than 1 acre, which is 2 separate parcels located along North Rutherford Boulevard and along Highway 96 or Lascassas Highway from their current CF zone, Commercial Fringe District, to CH Highway Commercial District. The property is located as an out parcel in the Kroger Shopping Center, the Lascassas Kroger, so that may help orient you. And it's directly adjacent to an existing McDonald's. The parcel that's shaded blue was included as additional study area by the Planning Commission, and that's the Burger King drive-through only concept that's located at the intersection. This property, these 2 properties are zoned CF, and were zoned CF in when the CF district was originally created. They are under a separate ownership than the Kroger parcel, so when the Kroger was originally zoned to PCD, Planned Commercial District, they were excluded from that application. Later, Kroger was rezoned to CH, Commercial Highway District, and were excluded from that application. They saw no need to ask for a zoning change. The purple shaded parcel is vacant, and the owner has someone interested in purchasing it and putting a automated car wash on that property. That's a use that's not permitted in the CF district, and that's motivating the request for this zoning change. Commercial highway zone is something that we typically see along major arterials. Both North Rutherford Boulevard and 96 are major arterials, and that would be consistent with the description of the CH zone. The staff's been working with the owner of the purple parcel to work out an easement, an access easement to get the Burger King access into the Kroger parking lot, which currently exists. That's something we're still working on, and site plan approval for any future development will require those access easements to be respected. The Planning Commission did conduct a public hearing on the matter, and their vote, or they recommend to you that you do approve this, and their recommendation is unanimous. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Green. All right, seeing no questions, we'll open the public hearing for this rezoning request. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll consider for passage on first reading ordinance 16OZ35 to rezone an area located along North Rutherford Boulevard and Old Lascassas Road to Highway Commercial CH District 2016-427.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now consider for Resolution 16R-PH36, adopted by the City Council on July 21st, 2016, to conduct a public hearing to consider rezoning approximately 44 acres located along Armstrong Valley Road from single-family residential RS-15 district to single-family residential 8 RS-8 district. Cornerstone Development applicant, 2016-428. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the August 1st, 2016 issue of a local newspaper. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. Subject property is located along the east side of Armstrong Valley Road, just south of the intersection with Veterans Parkway. There's a little bit of history on this property. Back in 2008, it was annexed and zoned as a PRD, Planned Residential District, for an active adult community, 55 and up community called Three Oaks at Armstrong Valley. That development was proposed to contain 165 condominium units. With the recession, that development never came to fruition, and the property owners never sold the property, and then in 2011 requested that the property be rezoned to RS-15 as they saw that the PRD zone was not going to be developed as it was approved. So the property has remained zoned RS-15 for some 5 years. Mr. Mingy with Cornerstone Development has put a contract on the property. His subdivision, the West Wind subdivision, is located just to the east of the subject property. West Wind has frontage on Veterans Parkway, just to the east of St. Andrews Drive. Mr. Mingy would like to develop this property with future sections of the West Wind subdivision. West Wind is zoned RS8, and he would like for this property to be zoned RS8 as well, to be consistent with the balance of his subdivision. And you can see on the map the portion labeled RS8 just to the, if we could pull the map back up, please. The portion that is labeled RS8 just to the east of the orange property, which is the subject property being requested. You'll notice that not all of the original property is that was zoned PRD and is now zoned RS15 is included. The southern, you can see my cursor there, the southern or the southwestern quarter of that property, 9 acres or so, was subsequently sold off to the property owner to the south. So it's the remaining 44 acres is what is being considered tonight. Staff has done a few calculations, and under the RS8 zone with 8,000 square foot minimum lots, we envision that a maximum number of lots would be 179, but realistically the number would likely be lower due to environmental constraints on that property and due to the fact that rarely are all lots developed at the minimum 8,000 square feet or the minimum in any zoning district. So with that being said, we need to conduct a public hearing on this matter tonight. The Planning Commission did conduct a public hearing at its July 13th meeting, and the Planning Commission recommended approval with 1 no vote. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Mingy from Cornerstone Development is here if you have any questions for him.
Thank you, Mr. Plumley. Okay. All right, we'll now open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request, please come to the podium. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and we'll consider for passage on first reading ordinance 16OZ36 to rezone an area located along Armstrong Valley Road to single family residential 8 RS8 district 2016-428.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now consider recommendations of the principal planner to schedule public hearings for rezonings along Reed Avenue to RS4, rezoning along Bradyville Pike to commercial fringe, rezoning along North Thompson Lane, Wilkinson Pike, CM GDO2, rezoning along Veterans Parkway to RS8, commercial fringe RM16, amended area along Asbury Lane in the Perlingbrook PRD, annexation petition and plan of services for an area along Veterans Parkway east of Cason Lane, and zoning along Veterans Parkway east of Cason Lane RM12 simultaneous with annexation. Mr. Lewis.
Mayor and council members, I'm trying to decide if I want to read that again, but I guess I will. During its regular scheduled meeting on August the 3rd, 2016, the Planning Commission conducted public hearings on the matters listed below. After the public hearings, the Planning Commission discussed the matters and then took action to recommend their approval. Number 1 being a zoning application for approximately 8.8 acres located along Reed Avenue to be rezoned from RD to RS4, Robert James and Betty French applicants. Zoning application for approximately 1 acre located along Bradyville Pike to be rezoned from CL to and RS to CF, Christine Carey applicant. Zoning application for approximately 10.3 acres located along North Thompson Lane and Wilkinson Pike to be rezoned from RS15 and LI to CM and GDO2. High Point Limited LLC is applicant. Zoning application for property located along Veterans Parkway to be rezoned from RM16 to RS8, RM16 to CF, and CF to RM16, Cornerstone Development LLC developer. zoning application for approximately 78.4 acres located along Asbury Lane to amend the PRD, Perling Brook PRD. Beezer Homes was applicant. Annexation plan of services and annexation petition for approximately 13.4 acres located along Veterans Parkway east of Cason Lane, Ardavana Fracte applicant. And zoning application for approximately 9.9 acres located along Veterans Parkway east of Cason Lane to be rezoned from RM12 simultaneous with annexation. Green Trails LLC applicant. It's recommended that the City Council schedule these matters for public hearings.
What day, sir?
Mayor, October 6th.
Okay.
October 6th.
Yeah, October 6th.
October 6th.
Shay. That's fall break. Just in case.
October 6th is fall break.
We need to move it up or back a week.
Yeah. Let's see. How about the 13th? Is that okay?
Looks good.
Okay.
13th, October 13th.
Yeah. All in one night?
Yeah.
Yeah, listen to Ron. He's not even going to be here. I was like, yeah.
Sure, yeah. You have to watch it.
I love it.
We set a public hearing October the 8th.
13th.
13th.
I'll second that.
And Doug, okay, we got a second, but you just went through these, you and Eddie. That's a lot.
I know it's a lot.
But it's
That was the question I made. Do we want to split these up? But I looked at the planning staff over there, and they said go for it. So,
All right.
We can do it.
All right.
October
Mr.
13th.
Bromley, would you like to interject some things into this?
Oh, I always like to interject some things.
Yeah.
There was really just one controversial application the night these were held, and that was denied, and the applicant has chosen not to move forward with that. So that particular application is not among this group. So I think these could easily be handled in the night.
Okay.
Very good.
Awesome. All right, you have October 13th. Can we have a motion?
A second.
All right, motion is second. Mr. Wright, for call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington. Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now consider recommendations of the interim Murfreesboro Parks and Recreation Director with change orders number 1 and 2 from Trinity Builders for the Miracle Field project.
Good afternoon, or good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of council. I'm here with a couple of change orders for the Miracle Field. Before we do that, I do want to give you an update on the progress of the project. We are on schedule currently. We are really shooting for a soft opening in early February before Mr. Price goes back to spring training, and we're on track for that now. They're pouring concrete Monday for the Miracle Field itself. First change order we have for you is in regard to an upgrade for the playground. We started this project, our primary focus was on the actual field itself, and as we started working with the community and working with the prices, we realized that the most important component in this project is going to be the playground, because it's going to be utilized every day, all day, whereas our actual Miracle Field will be utilized during leagues and seasons that are consistent with baseball. But the citizens of Murfreesboro will be able to enjoy this playground every day. So we started looking into that, and Mr. Bonnie and Ms. Price are here to talk on behalf of the playground and their interest in the upgrade and its purpose.
All right. Bonnie and I took a trip to Minnesota not too long ago to look at some playground equipment and even to look at how this playground equipment has been developed. Thomas Laird and his wife went along with us, and we were very impressed, I guess, with the equipment itself and even the design that has gone, what all has gone into the design of this playground equipment. And we realized how important it was for this playground to be an all-inclusive playground, that we really install the equipment that is designed for special needs children, specifically designed. So we were sold on the aspects of the different pieces. We felt like the design of them, so much time and effort and research had gone into these specific pieces that it was well worth the upgrade that we believe would benefit very much these children.
The design of the equipment was undertaken by pediatricians. So they were able to study the kids and give us a good idea what the equipment would do. But the playground itself will be able to be used by all kids, not just the challenged kid. So we're, taking care of everyone's need, and it would be top of the line. And the field, the playground is going to be, again, one of the ones that people will come to our community to look to get ideas on how they want to build theirs. And we have a top-of-the-line community, so we want to have the best we can give our community.
I know we could sit down, and I welcome all of you to come by, and we'll go through every component. But one example is the playground equipment that was proposed prior to this. They had slides. They were the typical plastic slide. This equipment has a roller slide, and you ask, well, what's the difference? Well, a child with a cochlear implant cannot use a regular slide because of the buildup of static electricity. The roller slides prevents that, so they're able to play just like the rest of the children. And that's just one example. Each piece has things that address the sensory needs. They say 1 in 20 children have sensory issues. That's 1 in 20. So when we look at that, when you say inclusive play, it encompasses a whole lot more than just a child in a wheelchair. Those children in a wheelchair are 1% of our special needs community. The rest are children with Down syndrome, autism, all these other components. Sensory issues are huge. And they've partnered with the Sensory Institute, the STAR Center out of Colorado, to do the research on each component. So that's why the recommendation is there. And I think it's well worth the funding for that. And then our second change order is the taps to tie into the main water line there at Memorial. The facility is going to need access to a fire hydrant fairly close, so this is just the tap fees to tie into the main water line there at Memorial so we can provide water and sewer. So I recommend that council would approve both change orders.
I'll move for approval.
Second. Ms. Wright, we have a motion and a second. If you'll call the roll.
Ms. Kels Harris.
Oh, sorry, hold on 1 second. Mr.
I was just going to make a comment. I've ridden by the field a few times here lately, and because I have the vision and the same dream that I know the Price family has, when I look over there, there's a special feeling about that property already, and you can see it because you can see it changing. And I know it's exciting for those of us who drive by that property every day and see what's going on out there. It's exciting what's happening, and we are so blessed in our community to have the Price family and David, who cares so much. And I just wanted to make that comment.
And yes, I'd like to make a comment too. It really touches my heart when I go by there, because my sister, if she was living, she would definitely benefit from this. So, and I think it's really important that we encompass everybody in our community that we can with all the needs that we can. So I'm really excited about it developing.
All right. Ms. Wright, we'll call the roll.
Ms. Kels Harris. Aye. Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We look forward to that February opening date too.
Yep.
So we're really excited. And I guess it will make sure that hopefully it'll be a little warmer I remember when we did the groundbreaking, it was sort of a cold day that day, so hopefully it'll have a little warm, a little warmer February. So, all right, thank y'all.
Thank you, guys.
Consider recommendations of the city manager regarding a traffic signal at Veterans Parkway and Barfield Crescent Road.
Yes, mayors and members of City Council, I am here to recommend a installation of a traffic signal at Veterans Parkway and Barfield Road. Now, this intersection is actually located outside the city limits, but in 2005, as the city began to plan what was then called the Southwest Loop, the agreement between the city and county called for the city to be responsible for the installation of traffic signals. We had done one traffic warrant analysis a while back. It did not meet the warrants, but it currently does meet the warrants for a traffic signal. We know the neighbors in that area are anxious to see the traffic signal, so we are recommending that the city install the traffic signal. Now, there's also some right-of-way and turn lanes that are needed. I have contacted Mayor Burgess and asked to see if the county would be willing to participate on that piece of it. He seemed like the county would move in a direction to accommodate those turn lanes. And so he's going to work through his county process to have the county highway department do that work. But the recommendation is for the city to install prepare the right-of-way documents, purchase the right-of-way, prepare the preliminary engineering drawings, and install the signal. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
There are no questions. I move for approval.
I'm going to second that. And my brother Eric Lamb, who was an employee, well, he still is, in Middle Tennessee Electric, he brought this to my attention about 2 or 3 years ago. And I want to commend the staff and Rob and all of you that have finally made this happen, because he brought it to my attention. And I told him we'll go through the process. I said, government's slow. It takes a little while, and you've got to get the numbers up and, see verification. So I want to thank Eric Lamb for bringing that to my attention, and for the staff for finally making this work.
Thank you.
I would want to have one comment that, we talk about responsiveness of government. Alan Farley, who's our election commission, head of the election commission, I feel like he'll text me periodically saying, "Hey, are y'all still working on this?" And so the wheels of government turn slow, but I'm very proud that we're able to get this, and it's another joint effort between the county and city where we work together to make sure it's in the best interest of all of our county residents.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
we have a motion and a second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Board and commission appointments, we have a reappointment to the Senior Citizen Commission, Ms. Marie Trott.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Also have for a future recommendation, since Mr. Wade will be taking Mr. Washington's place in this month, recommending Jennifer Garland to be appointed to fill the Planning Commission vacancy of Mr. Kurt Wade. So we'll vote on that at our next meeting. All right. Looks like we have a few beer permits.
We do. We have a new location at 2820 South Rutherford Boulevard. They do need to finish their building codes inspections, but other than that, their application does meet our requirements for issuance. And we have a special event application for several event dates for Oaklands Association, and it also meets our requirement for approval. So we would like to issue the special event permits. If you approve them tonight, we'll issue those tomorrow, and then the other permit, once they meet the codes inspections, if you approve it tonight, we'll issue that at that time.
Okay. Yeah. Do we have a motion? I don't think that's right. Yeah. Anyone want to make a motion for our beer permits?
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Wright, call the roll.
Ms. Kels Harris. Aye. Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye. Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Any statements, Ms. Wright?
No, sir, not tonight.
Okay.
Not enough.
Other business, Mr. Crumley?
Very briefly. At your desk, you should find a letter from Airport Director Chad Gerke seeking approval of the annual state maintenance contract. The state provides $14,300 a year to our airfield for routine maintenance, mowing, changing light bulbs, repairing fences, that type of work. This has been in place for as long as I can remember. This is just the annual version for the 2016-17 budget year.
Move for approval.
Aye.
Second.
Yeah.
Need a second. Mr. Young and Mr. Shacklet. Ms. Wright, call the roll.
Ms. Kels Harris. Aye. Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Second.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Second.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Any other business for the city council?
We want to.
Yeah, I want to point out one thing. You've got, Mr. Lyons does this every year, and it's a really, it's really telling to talk about the city. And I know we're all proud with the city, and there's things that we're proud of, and some things that, you know, we see improvement. But the average house in Murfreesboro pays $511 a year in sales tax. In property taxes. So that equates to $42.63 that the average home pays for police monthly, for police, fire, parks and rec, all the things that we have in the city. So I know I routinely get a cell phone bill that's many times what this is. So, you know, I think when we look at our Parks and Recreation Department, all the things that you get for $40 a month, that's less than some gym memberships. And I know it goes to show with the police, the fire protection, all that you have here. Obviously, there's opportunities that we need to improve on, but with this education system we have and all the things we have here, $40 a month is, I'd say that's probably one of the best deals in the country you're going to get. Although I would like you to look at the mayor council budget that's down there, because I know that that's not what we made.
No, sir. There
Does
are
that
some.
include like this building or something?
No, there are things like the Christmas gift cards to our employees that is included in that budget, and some other
I was going to say, I want to see everybody's check in there.
Yeah,
My check doesn't look like that.
Yeah. All right. We appreciate you giving this. It's good every year. And what really is also, it shows that when we see what this average house appraised is, it was not too long ago that this number was $140,000 for the average house. So it shows you sort of what that median household price is doing. So, you know, on Monday when we have our workshop, you know, we're going to be talking about things like affordable housing and different topics. So to preface that, or to move on, we've got our workshop the 22nd at 11 o'clock.
11:30 at the water plant.
Yeah, at the water plant. And we've got, I think, a really cool layout for everyone to look at on how each individual issue, you're going to get it tomorrow, but it shows what the topic is, what the issue is, what we need to discuss. And so we can dive into several different topics, and then we'll do this over the next course of several months. So,
and the workshop is next Monday from 11:30 to 3:30. Is that correct?
I think we said 11:30 to
Till you
how
get
long?
done.
Yeah, we've got till 5 to get it done. So
And I know if there's extra time at the end, the staff at the water plant would certainly welcome to give you a tour.
Yeah.
Is there lunch?
Did we determine if there would be lunch or not?
Yeah, we'll feed you. Yes, sir.
Okay.
What about getting in?
We will take care of the access.
I'm going to run a little late.
Okay, yeah, that is for Homeland Security reasons, is a controlled access facility, but we'll take care of access, so when you go there, we'll have it open for you.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Okay. All right. Seeing no other business, we'll stand adjourned.